We are going to tackle the final candle of the Advent season, and that's the Christ candle. We are here today to celebrate the reality that the King is in the room. Like he's not far off. He's not some distant God that's disconnected from our reality. He is God with us. He's here, he's present, he lives in us and through us, and that is so significant for us because as we move in a world that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, knowing that we have a God who joins us in that space is significant. And so what we want to make sure of is that we take time to celebrate that. Paul, in his writings in the New Testament, seems to be really, really adamant about the fact that the most important thing that we will ever recognize is how important Jesus is. Like the most important thing that we will ever come to terms with is how much we need Jesus in our life. And anything else is kind of, it's superfluous. I know, it's strong. It just doesn't matter. We can give all of our energy to so many things, but Paul's message, like I preach Christ and him crucified, that's it. That's all that he cared about. I'm gonna use some passages this morning that aren't very Christmassy, but hang with me because we're gonna get Christmassy. Just going to take a minute to get there. I don't think it would be an Aaron Couch sermon if we just went right to Christmas. We got to go on a journey. Philippians chapter 1, verses 15 to 18, Paul writes this. He's in prison, and what's happening in the Philippian church is there are people who are doing the work of Christ out of noble motives, and then there are people who are doing it to try to take advantage and get ahead and leverage it to gain whatever they were trying to gain. And so Paul writes about this, like how are we supposed to deal with these people that are messing it all up? Here's what he says. Some indeed preach Christ from envy and rivalry, but others from goodwill. The latter do it out of love, knowing that I'm put here for the defense of the gospel. Put here means put in prison. The former proclaim Christ out of selfish ambition, not sincerely, but thinking to afflict me in my imprisonment. What then? What should we do with them? Only that in every way, whether in pretense or in truth, Christ is proclaimed. That's all he cared about. In that I rejoice. Some people are going to preach Christ from a bad place. Some people are going to preach Christ from a good place. I don't care. Preach Christ. That's all that mattered to him. This message of a God who shows up for us. By the way, that's Christmas. That's the message of Christmas, that in a really messy place, God shows up. He keeps his promise. This is Colossians chapter 3. Here's what Paul also writes. He's not in prison this time, but here's what he writes. Do not lie to one another, seeing that you've put off the old self with its practices and have put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge after the image of its creator. Here there is not Greek and Jew, circumcised and uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave, free, but Christ is all and in all. That's it. Don't stop labeling people. Stop putting people in categories. Christ is it. That's all that matters, is that we're in Christ. And if we're not there, then that's a problem. But outside of that, none of the other categories that we try to label people with mean anything. Because once we're in Christ, everything serves that. That's his passionate message. Paul works really hard in his letters to show us that Jesus is the only thing that matters. That we should follow only him. That we should reflect only him. By the way, no matter where we are, You know, like when we're at the sporting event, that we should reflect only him. So if you don't know, I'm a wrestling coach, and one of the things, I had a really cool opportunity to struggle with this. Thursday night, one of our kids was wrestling. He was on bottom, and the guy on top of him had his arm behind his back, which is legal until you get the elbow bent past 90 degrees, and then it's a potentially dangerous hold. What they're supposed to do is blow the whistle, call potentially dangerous, reset them, and start the match again. What the ref did was jumped in and put pressure on the shoulder. And I just about lost my noodles. I was like, he's my boy. You know, I always wanted to go to war. And then I was like, you should reflect only him. In a home duel at a Christian high school. Like, it was, dang it, man. I was like, I don't want to reflect him right now. And there are moments where we find that, but here's the thing, nothing else that I can reflect matters. I can get caught up in chasing all kinds of things, but we should reflect only him. We should give our energy to only what he wants. Everything else is chasing the wind. Good luck catching it. And why in the world would we go to the world for things that only God can provide? We chase dreams and status and money and security and all this. Why would we go to the world for things that only God provides? And then be mad when we don't get it? Surprise! We should also understand that his perspective is bigger than ours. And so, sometimes Jesus does things that confuses us. And sometimes Jesus doesn't do things, and that confuses us. But it's because we're often trusting way too much in our own perspective of things to allow God to move in his perspective. And that's it's catastrophic for our faith, because we're like, but God, you have to do it my way. I've been walking with Jesus for a long time now, and I've been trying so hard my entire life with Jesus. I've been trying so hard to find a place where my perspective is more righter than his. I've really been trying, and we keep coming up against this where God's perspective is here and mine's over here, and I keep going, but God, look, and he's like, you're wrong. And what's interesting is I'm 100% fail at that endeavor. There's never been a moment where when my perspective differs from God's, I'm right and he's wrong. But we trust in our own perspective way, way too much. Way too much. A year ago, that was redundant because I said it twice. I only have 2 more times to do this. I'll get it ironed out. A year ago, the message of our Advent, and this is really still true this year, is that Christmas is a story of a God who shows up in our messes. Because it's true. What we've talked about this year so far, though, is that sometimes God's timing isn't always ours. It doesn't line up with how we want him to show up, or more importantly, when we want him to show up in the mess. Nor is God's desire for us through the mess often the same as ours. We want God to deliver us out of the mess. God is a God who walks with us through it. And so a year ago, my wife and I were smack dab in the middle of this story that we've kind of been highlighting over the last year with my niece. If you haven't been familiar with that, about December 1st last year, she contracted influenza A, which turned septic. So they went to the hospital and her body literally shut down. She was on life support for, it was either 78 or 87 days. It was a long time. There was not another place that you could put a tube on her body. Like every organ was being supported by machines. And she's 26, young, right? Kelly and I were given a very clear directive by God to go there and pray. And it was the Thursday before our Christmas Eve services. So it was like December the 16th or 17th, somewhere in there. And Christmas Eve services were Friday and Saturday that next week because Christmas Eve was a Saturday last year. Which, by the way, for the record, I make a motion that we just move Christmas Eve to the Sunday before Christmas, because this is dope. Like, I am in love with Sunday morning Christmas Eve services. But so it was December 17th, and we're like, God's like, we want you to go. They're in North Idaho, right? It's not just a jaunt. It's a epic adventure to get there. And we were like, God, no, like we can't. There's no way. It's so busy. And God's like, I want you to go and I want you to pray over her. And I was like, what are you going to do, God? And so, I said no, and he said go, and I said no, and he said go. And so we went, and that's yet another example of how my relationship with the Lord works. Sometimes it's obedience under duress. But we went and prayed over her, and she got worse. Literally every organ in her body shut down. And we were so confused by that. Because every one of us kind of had this sense that God was going to do something in this space, that he wouldn't call us, however many hundreds of miles away in the middle of this season to do this if he didn't have something very, very special planned for this moment. 30 minutes before our Christmas Eve services started last year, I got a phone call from my sister-in-law, my brother's wife, that said they just did a scan and they're saying that there is 0% chance of lung function. 30 minutes before I had to get on stage and talk about a God who shows up in our messes. And he didn't. But he did. Now, he didn't show up the way I wanted. What I wanted was to walk into a room, speak a magic incantation, wave my hands, and she bounded out of the bed and run a marathon. That's what I wanted. What I can tell you is, without medical explanation, little by little by little, her organs started to work again. And they were like, the doctors were like this. We don't know. We don't know why. What I can also tell you is that today, she is in services for Christmas Eve. And her lungs are working. Now, that being said, they're not healed completely, and that's the tension, right? Is that, did God do a miracle to restart her body? Like he did a full-blown Control-Alt-Delete. Shut it all down, restart it. He did that. And there's still some ground to cover before she's back to where she was. And is she gonna get there? I don't know. But here's the thing. What I know for sure is God showed up and he did a miracle, and that miracle has actually revolutionized my walk with the Lord over the last year, even though it wasn't the miracle that I prayed for. Christmas is that story. Christmas is the story of a God who is in fact present in our messes. And he doesn't often work things out the way we want him to work them out. But in the end, when we look back at it, although we would never want to go through it again, he worked it out better than we ever could have come up with on our own. And that's not like, I hate that because I love God for doing that, but I hate that I'm always the wrong one in that, because I have great ideas here. If God would just listen to me. But here's what I can tell you honestly, if God would just listen to me, I would be missing profound layers of intimacy with him. I wouldn't have them had I not had to walk through this journey. And here's the thing. One of the most profound lessons that we can learn in life is that we never really come to terms with the fact that Jesus is all we need until Jesus is all we've got. And then we find out that he's more than enough. The greatest gift that God can give you is his presence in your life. That's what we're created for. And it's not often flashy, and it's not it's not that. It's not dramatic. It's simple. And it's peaceful, and it's secure, and it's good. In the midst of whatever life brings us. So we don't get too hype on the good things, but we don't get too destroyed by the hard things. We stay in the pocket of God is good. He is in all and through all. That's all that matters. That's Christmas. Christmas shows us that God does in fact meet us in our messes. Now, not always our way, but he's always present. And we can trust that in any circumstance, regardless of the mess, he's all that matters. Now, normally at this part of the service, I say I have some implications for you. And that's the cue for our communion team to go back and get the elements and start passing them out. I'm not doing implications today. What I decided to do is blessings. I want to give each of us 4 blessings for Christmas. It's still the cue for the communion team to go back and get their stuff. That's why they're like, man, these people got mad and left quick. That turned dark. So here's the reason why I choose blessings. The people who wrote the Bible believe that blessings are very important. In fact, they call blessings an active agent. What that means is when you speak a blessing into someone's life, you're obligating God to pull it off. And we ought to think about that when we're talking with people. More importantly, we ought to think about that when we're talking about people. But there's even a section in Luke chapter 10, where Jesus says, go, he sends out the disciples and he says, I want you to, when you enter a house, speak peace is how it's translated. And it can also be translated blessing. Speak a blessing on someone, and if a person of blessing lives there, then they'll get the blessing. But if a person of blessing does not live there, then that blessing will fall back on you. What kind of blessings would you speak if you had a potential to get the thing you're asking for? Right? I think we ought to keep that in mind as we become people of blessing in the world. So, some blessings for us this morning. Blessing number one. The cough's almost gone, by the way. Almost gone, but not entirely. As we reflect on the holiday season and the story of Christmas, may we be people who seek only Christ. May we be people this year who seek only Christ. Number two, blessing. As we move into the next year, may we be people who reflect only Christ. Because we can get caught up in reflecting all kinds of things, but none of them matches our calling. May we be people who reflect only Christ. Blessing number three. Sorry, force of habit. Don't mess with tradition. When we face decisions in the coming year, may we be a people who let Jesus speak into and reign in how we make those decisions. Not just the decisions we make, but how we make them. May even the very motivation of our heart be something that reflects who Jesus actually is. Blessing number four. As we navigate the messes of our world and our lives in the next year, may we be people who have hope and peace and joy and love for others, knowing that we serve a God who shows up. May we be people who reflect the spirit of the Advent, the arrival, in a way that draws the world to him. As we get our hearts ready for communion this morning, it might be good for you to just think about, of those four blessings, which one resonates with you the most? Why don't you talk with the Lord about that for a minute as we get ready to take communion together? On the night Jesus was betrayed, he took bread and he broke and he said, "This is my body which is given for you. So whenever you eat this bread, do it in remembrance of me." Let's remember him together. And then after the dinner, he took a cup and he said, "This cup, this is the blood of the covenant which is shed for you. So whenever you drink this cup, do it in remembrance of me." Let's pray. God, thank you for showing up. Thank you for not abandoning us, no matter how big the mess gets. And no matter how great the victory is in our life, you're still God of all of that too. Lord, thank you for the promise of your presence, which is not just what we need, but it's all that we need. In Jesus' name, amen.